Welcome back into the Shot Show. I am your host, White Shot, and today we are taking a look at the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and what a season it was for them. Marcus Freeman led his guys to a 14-2 record. He brings in Riley Leonard from Duke and says, you know what? Let's just go out there and run the football and win some games. And that's exactly what they do. They win against Georgia. They win against Penn State. They win against Texas A&M. They win against USC. They win against Louisville. And this was a team that also lost to Northern Illinois. Let's not forget that. They lost to Northern Illinois in week 2. And the fire bells were just going off. The fire alarms were going off. It was craziness. Is Marcus Freeman going to get fired? Is he the right head coach for Notre Dame? He lost to Marshall earlier in his tenure, and so people were thinking maybe he doesn't have what it takes. He's a young guy. This is his first head coaching job after Brian Kelly left. And look, there were some serious doubts, and maybe rightfully so. But he silenced those doubters. And he's earned that silence because they go all the way to the national championship game and they end up losing to Ohio State, but they made that thing competitive there at the end. And they showed that maybe just because they're not at the same level of recruiting as a Georgia with the blue chip ratio, with the 4 stars and 5 stars, it didn't really matter. They were still there, and heck, they beat Georgia, and they were right there with Ohio State to win the whole thing. And so a great year for Notre Dame. It was just a wild start. But now you're going into 2025 and you lose Riley Leonard, who maybe he wasn't the best passer. Maybe he wasn't the most explosive athlete, but he was a hell of a football player. And losing a guy like that with the kind of experience that he had, it's just going to be difficult. You don't replace those guys overnight. Now they're hoping that CJ Carr can do that. And they're hoping that not only can you replace him, that he can elevate the passing game a little bit. We'll get more into that later. But first, let's get into some of the key losses for Notre Dame. Of course, I mentioned Riley Leonard already. You also lose Xavier Watts, Riley Mills, Benjamin Morrison, and Jack Kaiser. Riley Mills was dominating on the interior defensive line in the entire season, really, but especially in the playoffs. And then Jack Kaiser at the linebacker position was a veteran guy that it's going to be tough to replace his experience and his leadership, although I think they have some of the bodies to do it. A lot of them were already on the roster, and then they bring in a couple of freshmen at the linebacker position that I think can really help. Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts, those are tough guys to replace. You bring in a couple of DBs, most notably of them is Devonta Smith from Alabama. But those are some guys that are going to play in the NFL for a long time, and I don't know if you replace them with the same caliber of athlete as those kind of guys. However, I digress. They bring in the 12th rated recruiting class, a couple of key guys in that. Will Black was one of them, and then Madden Faremo, the linebacker that I mentioned. They won a big recruiting battle against Texas and USC for him. He's the kind of guy that he's probably going to start 3 years at Notre Dame or 2 years at Notre Dame. He might declare early. That's a NFL-ready linebacker, and he's going to be a great college player. I just don't know how much burn he gets in the 2025 season. They bring in the 64th rated portal class, and that is where they had Will Pauling as well as Malachi Fields, 2 really big needs at the wide receiver position. People are not talking about Malachi Fields in the national landscape, but do not be surprised if by the end of the season, Malachi Fields is sitting there with 1,000 receiving yards. He's the transfer from Virginia. He had about 800 yards receiving there, and Virginia was not a very good football team, and he still found a way to put up some really good numbers. This team, however, is all about the returners. It is all about the players coming back. Jeremiah Love, Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, and 6 returning starters on defense. The team is very, very old, and we found that in the playoff era, these older teams succeed a lot more. Michigan, for example. Washington in the same year was another old team. Texas in 2023 was an older team. Texas this past year was an older team. Texas loses 4 of their stars on offensive line and their quarterback. These older teams in the portal era have found a way to just be really, really solid and really, really good. And that makes sense because in nowadays you don't see a lot of guys stick around for 3 or 4 years, and therefore they're on the same scheme for 3 or 4 years. But if you have an older team like Michigan, like Notre Dame, you can plug and play some of those transfers that have the experience, and the rest of your guys already know what to do. Now, what's different about this Notre Dame team is CJ Carr. CJ Carr is what's going to make this whole thing turn. He is going to decide whether this is a national championship contending team or if this is a 9-3 bowl kind of team. Is this a Pop-Tarts Bowl team or is this a Rose Bowl team? That's what CJ Carr is going to decide. Look, man, they want to do more with this passing game that they couldn't do last year, and they have the receivers to do it. That's why they went out and got Malachi Fields and Will Pauling and added that to Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison. Because Mike Denbrock, who's the former LSU offense coordinator for none other than Jaden Daniels in his Heisman-winning season, he wants to do a lot of different things with this offense. He's going to be able to run the ball with that offensive line and Jeremiah Love. Will he be able to take the top off of defenses? He's got the receivers to do it. Does he have the quarterback to do it? That's what we're going to find out. CJ Carr is the ultimate X factor for this team and possibly for the entire college football season. Let's get into this schedule. It's always tougher than people make it seem. You hear the narrative that Notre Dame doesn't play anybody only because they're not in a conference, and it just couldn't be any farther from the truth. They play quality opponents every single year, and this year is no different. You start the year at Miami. Who knows what Miami's going to be, but insiders around Miami think that this is the best team that Mario Cristobal's had, despite Cam Ward being there last year. They think that this is a much more complete team, even though the quarterback position is probably not going to be as good. Then you go and play Texas A&M at home. You beat them at Kyle Field last year. I think Texas A&M is going to be an improved team this year, so watch out for that. Then you get an easy one at Purdue. And then this is probably the weirdest stretch of your entire schedule. You go at Arkansas and then Boise State at home. At Arkansas is interesting because they are all in on the transfer portal. They have 53 new players, including transfers and freshmen, that are going to be on this team. If it doesn't work for this year, then they're probably firing Sam Pittman and they're going to mess around and hire Bobby Petrino as the head coach. However, they have Taylor Green still. They still got some guys around there. Who knows? You got to watch out for it. At Arkansas, it's a really hostile place to play. And then you get Boise State at home. They shouldn't be as good as last year, but it's still a quality opponent. Going to be one of the better G5 teams in the country. Then you have NC State, and you get USC. And USC has a chance to really be special this year. I'm not talking about national championship contender, but I'm talking about really, really good defense, which is not something you associate with Lincoln Riley's teams, and an offense that is going to be competent because Lincoln Riley's coaching it. I'm just saying you have to go, or you get them at home, thankfully, but USC is going to be a lot better of an opponent than last year. And you had a scary game against USC in 2024. You end up getting that pick six there at the end, but they scored a lot of points against Notre Dame, who was a very good defense last year. And then to end the year, things really slow down. You get Navy at home, who will be okay with Horvath at quarterback, but nothing special. Notre Dame should handle that. And then you get Pitt, Syracuse, and Stanford to close the year out. Those should be 3 easy wins. I have the ceiling with this team at 11-1. I have the floor at 7-5. And let me explain why the floor is 7-5. Do I think Notre Dame's going to go 7-5? Absolutely not. I don't think that's going to happen. However, this is kind of the logic of why y'all lost to NIU this past year. Notre Dame lost to NIU because they did not have the caliber of athlete, outside of maybe a few positions with like Jeremiah Love, but overall not the caliber of athlete to just hit on explosive plays nonstop. Okay? They didn't have that in their bag. And if CJ Carr hits, you don't have to worry about this problem at all anymore. But last year's team with Riley Leonard, where you didn't have the explosive passing game, let's say you don't have that again this year, you're not going to be able to just blow the game wide open against these teams. Every game is going to be close. And Notre Dame fans know this. You know that you've played in a lot of close games, and in close games, all it takes is one wrong bounce of the ball, and you're looking at a 7-1 compared to a 4-3. Like, these things happen. I don't think they're going to go 7-5. The ceiling, I have them at 11-1. I think they're going to go 10-2, and that should be good enough to get them in the 12-team playoff. And then once you're in that playoff, man, anything can happen. You saw what you did this past year. You saw what Ohio State did after having 2 losses in the regular season and losing to a bad Michigan team. Overall, I think this is a super seasoned team that proved it can still compete at the highest level in this sport despite a slightly inferior roster. If CJ Carr can bring a more dynamic passing game and take care of the ball, Notre Dame will find themselves right back in the playoffs. And honestly, they have potential to be even better than last year's team. If Carr doesn't work out, the team could falter a little, but they should still be good enough to lean on that offense line in Jeremiah Love and make some plays and win some football games. With that being said, Notre Dame, I think that y'all are going to be a really good team this year. Thank y'all so much for watching. If you have any suggestions of who we should break down next, or you want to just comment down below your thoughts on Notre Dame, I will be there to reply. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.